and very special for learners and teachers in general. It is the main tool by which human beings make use of words in order to explore and understand themselves and their environment. I believe we are all aware of that. And then today our presentation is going to consider what we need to do as teachers to arouse and stimulate students' interest in learning poetry. This is necessary because poetry awakens child's sensitivity, awareness, and then a sense of closeness to nature. This was one of the key reasons that gave us the idea to put up this topic or this series, so that as teachers, we can learn how best we can nurture the habit of studying and reading poetry among our learners in our various classrooms. So once again, we welcome all of you and thank you for joining us. Enjoy our session today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fati. That was the opening speech by Ms. Fati Isifu, the Vice President and Academic Director of IELTA Ghana. We'll move on to the introduction of the speaker. Today, we are privileged to have here with us Mr. Jacob as a speaker for today's session. And may I read his brief profile here so that he can officially begin the session. We don't want to waste so much of his time. Jacob Moisop Gando is an English language teacher at Zabzugu Senior High School in the northern region of Ghana. He holds a bachelor and master's degree in arts education, English language, from the University of Cape Coast, Ghana. In his quest to attain academic and professional heights, he is currently a Master of Philosophy student with the same university. He ventured into the teaching profession because of his love and passion for the profession. He's an assistant tutor, lecturer at Colleges for Distance and E-Learning, OJEL, University of Education, Winnipeg, Ghana, Yenli Study Center. He is also an assistant tutor at the Institute for Distance and Continuing Education, University for Development Studies, Ghana, Bimbila Center. Jacob was adjudged as the National Best Senior High School and Technical and Vocational Education and Training Teacher in Ghana for the year 2020. He is an assistant examiner with the West Africa Examination Council for WASI and BEC. Mr. Jacob is the Learners Program Coordinator for the International English Language Teachers Association, Ghana chapter. Thank you so much, Mr. Jacob, for honoring this invitation. All right, so Mr. Jacob, the platform is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, the President of IELTA Ghana and the entire membership of IELTA Worldwide. In fact, I must confess it is an honor to be given the opportunity to lead the presentation on how to attract students' interest in poetry. Thank you very much. And I'm sure it is there's going to be a teamwork. Me leading is just an opportunity, but we can tap ideas from all learned colleagues and make this presentation a successful one. Thank you very much. Okay, poetry, like the academic director rightly introduced, is one of the branches of literature, very, very important. However, research has it that among the three branches of literature, poetry seems to be ignored and neglected. I have observed that students are often seen with books on prose and drama. They mostly enjoy discussing drama, they mostly enjoy discussing prose. But when it comes to poetry, hardly will you hear them discussing this. We teachers sometimes also express a great unease about teaching poetry, maybe probably because our students seem not to have much interest in poetry as they do in the other two genres of literature. So it is against this background that we want to see how best we can do as teachers to help students develop love for poetry. So we quickly go to our assessing objectives and see what is expected of us. By the end of the presentation, we should be able to understand the elements of poetry. Then we should find out the attitude of students towards the teaching of poetry in schools. Then we should be able to arouse and sustain students' interest in poetry, and also mention what goes into poetry appreciation. Can we move to the next slide, please? Okay, we just want to look at the background. We cannot talk about poetry without talking about literature. Kennedy, as cited in Kofi Ayakum in 2013, considers literature as a kind of art, usually written, which offers pleasure and stimulation. So for Kennedy, the emphasis of literature is on written works, which provides us with pleasure and education. Lewis, in the same year, also regarded literature in English as the extensive reading aspect of English rather than the intensive. And his argument was on the fact that when we are looking at the intensive aspect of English, then we limit our concentration on summary, on structure, on composition, comprehension, and as the center of teaching English language. But the moment we talk about literature, then we go beyond the intensive aspect of poetry to involve the extensive aspect, which involves reading extensively, reading people's pieces, reading a lot of materials, appreciating them, and trying to reason along with the authors. So literature, in short, can be classified as an imaginative writings of human materials and a recreation for the purpose of education and entertainment. Okay. Now let's look at our main discussion, poetry itself. Poetry, according to William Wordsworth, is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. It takes its origin from emotions recollected in tranquility. For William Wordsworth, he looked at poetry as an accumulated overflow of emotions. A writer will be able to pour out his emotions, not in the form of drama, not in the form of prose, but in the form of poetry. So poetry is something that helps us to be able to pour out our feelings, maybe what do we encounter in our environment. It is not all that different from the other genres of literature. Maybe the elements and the way in which we should go about it just makes the difference. So poetry always economizes words. It uses few words to communicate an idea to an audience, unlike the way we are always verbose when it comes to prose and drama. Okay, can we move to the next slide? Now here we want to look at an element that always come together to make up a poem. What are the characteristics of poetry? When we are talking about poetry, first of all, every poem should have a title. And the title, we are just talking about the sum of the subject matter. The title of a poem is mostly the sum of the subject matter. Then the theme is another element of poetry. And for the theme, I think we are looking at the central idea that a writer will put across in his or her work. Sometimes there can be more than one theme in a literary work. It does not necessarily mean that every literary piece has one theme. We can have either one theme, two, or even more in a literary work, depending on the choice of the writer. Then we have diction, which is the choice, the writer's choice of vocabulary. Author's use of words is the diction. So every poem has diction. And it is not possible that all poems should have one diction, because writers mostly normally vary their choice of words in their literary pieces. Then we have figurative language, which is also one of the important elements of poetry. With the figurative language, we are talking about literary devices. We are talking about metaphor, we are talking about simile. We are talking about alliteration, assonance, and so forth. So the figurative language is where writers use words, maybe possibly to create images in the mind of the reader. All right. Then we also look at poetic license. I think poetic license is also another element of poetry. Poetic license, we are talking about the right of a writer, the right of a poet to use language as he or she pleases. A writer can decide to use any language at all that will suit his interest once that particular language can be able to convey his or her intended message. For example, maybe if we have a statement like, he dressed all in green, he dressed all in green. Maybe any writer can decide to turn this statement and possibly say, dress in green, all was he. Dress in green, all was he. You cannot question the poet because that is his own choice of word. The only important thing is for you and I to help understand what the poet is trying to put across. Okay, then we equally have a symbolism, which is another element of poetry. Symbolism, which is another element of poetry, the presentation of a concrete object that represent abstract or intangible ideas. The imagery is there. I think there are many, there are so many elements of poetry. Now, as teachers, we cannot just go and start teaching our students how to appreciate poetry without taking them through the elements. At least first, let us help them to understand the elements of poetry. And from there, you can now move ahead and think of helping them to appreciate poetry. You may not be able to give a vivid appreciation of a poetry if you don't know much about the elements. But the elements, let me say, mostly they're inexhaustible. We have sound, like you can see on the screen. We have structure, we have symbolism. The imagery too is there. Imagery is where we employ words that will affect readers' emotions, where we employ words that will affect readers' emotions. That is the imagery. The imagery can be visual, the imagery can be seen, it can be heard, and so forth. All right, then the structure is the physical representation of the poem. Maybe the poem is mostly written in a stanza or verse. So the structure of the poem may determine the organization of the subject matter. Okay, then with regards to the sound, we know poets normally take delight in the sound of a language. Maybe this is where sometimes they deliberately present some sounds that at the mere reading of the poem, you will enjoy the sound, and maybe the presentation of the sound will emphasize meaning. The presentation of the sound will arrest, it will attract the attention of you, the reader. So basically, and many other elements, these are the few elements that we will discuss. But as language teachers, we all know that there are so many elements or characteristics of poetry. But maybe to come to the level of our students, if we are able to take them through these elements, it can help them to now tackle how to appreciate points properly. And that one will rather arrest their interest in poetry rather than chasing them away. Okay, can we move to the next slide, please? Okay, our students in classroom have perceptions. They have perceptions about poetry. So we are looking at perceptions of students towards poetry. People believe that poetry is hard to work with because it has misleading perceptions. It is comparatively unpopular with students and demands a different kind of reading from prose and drama. Maybe our students believe that the way and manner in which we approach poetry is different from that of prose. It is equally different from that of a drama. And there is a research back into this. Prothroyd 1986 said this. Then there is also this perception that poetry employ extremely complex grammar and strange vocabulary. the vocabulary in poetry is always complex and strange. And possibly that may be the reason why we are not all that interested, especially our students in poems. Then poetry is also seen as a classroom task concerned with the study of poetics. Maybe people believe that there are some individuals that were just created to become poets, but that is not the case. Your teacher can psych your mind to become a lover of poetry. Your mind can be psyched and you will appreciate poetry and even aspire to become a poet. Then studying poetry, according to some school of thought, is a waste of time and resources because they believe poetry only belongs to intellectuals and the genius in society. So if you are looking at yourself not to be too smart, like I am here, you may try to avoid poetry, thinking that poetry is meant for the intellectuals. Those in the intellectual community are qualified to study poetry, but that is not the case. Maybe the desire, our passion for other genres of literature can equally be the same towards poetry, if only we get the necessary guidelines, if we get the necessary motivation from our teachers and those in authority. Okay, please, can we move to the next slide? Now, students' attitude towards poetry. Because of these perceptions, the attitude of our students towards poetry has changed. Once they have this kind of perception, some of them try to escape poetry lessons. I am teaching in a senior high school, Zabzugu Senior High School, and I can tell you for sure that anytime we have lesson in poems, mostly some of the students do try to escape, maybe simply because they feel like it is not necessary. Even if they sit down in classroom, they are going to waste their time without absorbing anything. That is their attitude towards it. Then most students, they spend much more time, like I said earlier, reading novels. They spend their time reading drama than they do to poetry. And that is an attitude. Once you have that particular attitude, then your understanding and your desire for poetry is going to be affected. Is going to be affected. You may not give total commitment and dedication to poems. Then students perform poorly in poetry aspect of both literature in English and English literature. You know, if you're teaching core English, for the case of Ghana here, we have a literature aspect of English language. Then we also have literature in English as a subject. So this was a chief examiner's report in 2016. They have actually realized that students are doing well in other aspects of literature, but when it comes to poetry, the performance is different. So can we change the narrative? I think that has informed the IELTA Ghana to come out with this topic for us to see how best we can team up, put our heads together, and help our students to develop love for poetry. Then I've conducted a preliminary investigation in Zabzugu district, and the finding was that poetry is not taught always, and so students do not like it. The investigation proved that I don't know whether it is because of the attitude of students. We teachers don't also have the desire to be teaching poetry like the way we do to other genres of literature. And that one might have affected the love of students towards poetry. So some students claim that poetry has no bearing to their lives. So because of that, they don't have time. And all these things is leading to their negative attitudes towards poetry. Okay, please, can you take us to the next slide? Okay, having looked at the attitude, the perceptions, and we want to look at how we can be able to overcome the negative attitude of students towards poetry. What should we do as teachers? Okay, one, I am of the opinion that we should try to write a song using the diction of the target poem that we intend teaching in class. Then we sing that song with the students for at least 5 minutes. Just write a song with the diction of the poem that we intend to teach in classroom. then you sing the song with students. The reason for this is most of our students easily sing songs, even if they hear that song for once. And with that attitude, with that love for singing, if you, the teacher, is able to compose a song using the diction of the poem you intend to teach, it may help the students to transfer their love for songs to their love for poetry. So let us just try. It is not easy. Not all of us can sing, but that is how we are teaching. You can collaborate. You may know a colleague who is possibly good in singing. So you just get a poem, and that colleague will help you. We are not saying you should use all the words in the poem to compose a song, but you can make sure about 70 or even 60% of the diction in the poem is being captured in the song, and it is going to motivate the students to learn the poem, because lo and behold, they might have mastered the song, and that one alone will trigger their interest to learn the poem. Please, can we go? All right, with regard to the song, I just used this man, William Blake's poem, A Poison Tree. Though I'm not good at singing, but I think I tried something. William Blake's poem is, I think the poem is just 2 stanzas of 4. The poem is not all that lengthy. But because of our time, I have used only the first and the second stanza, and I tried composing song. It is not ultimate. Maybe you can equally try compose a nice song and share with us. But with a song, example of a song, I tried by saying that I was angry with my friend. I told him my wrath did end. I was angry with my foe. I told him not, and my wrath did grow. Day and night with all my tears, I was angry with my friend. I told him my wrath did end. I was angry with my foe. I told him not, and my wrath did grow. Day and night with all my tears. Just pardon me for that horrible voice. But that is just a song I tried composing. So that at first, I will not even let the students know that I'm coming to teach poem. But I'll come and tell them that, okay, I just want us to learn how to sing this song. The song it will just be like a starter. Then after learning how to sing the song, then I will introduce them to William Blake's poem, A Poison Tree. And if you read the poem, you will actually see that the first and the second stanzas actually has most of the words captured in the song. For example, the poem goes like this. I was angry with my friend. I told my wrath did end. I was angry with my foe. I told it not, my wrath did grow. And I watered it in tears, night and morning with my tears. And I sang it with smiles. So that is just a poem. And you could see that there is that kind of alignment with the song you have taught them earlier and the poem you are coming to teach them. Maybe the desire and the interest in singing the song can trigger their understanding of the poem, or it can it can stimulate their interest to give you their total attention to the poem. So that is one of the ways we may help overcome a student's negative attitude towards poetry. Please, can we move to the next slide and look at the rest? Then the second one, we are saying that as teachers, let us always guide our students to change writings from other genres form of poetry, to change writings from other forms of literature to the poetry form. For instance, you can just write a paragraph, a paragraph on board, then you help them change that paragraph into poetic form. So when we start doing that, they may get the idea behind poetry, and they may come to realize that poetry is not all that special. poetry is not other different from prose and poetry, from prose and drama, but it is just that we don't know how the writings of poems are presented. So if we try to change their mind from prose form of writings, drama form of writings to poetry form, they may develop total interest and even aspire to become poets. For example, I just gave a short writing. Every day I scream and you also scream. In the end, we all scream for the ice cream. This is just a lesson. This writing is in prose. Every day I scream and you also scream. In the end, we all scream for ice cream. So what I have just read, we can try writing it in the form of a poem, and you can see it on your right-hand side of the screen. I scream, you scream, we all scream for ice cream. So the first one we read for them is in prose form. Now then, the next one you have just introduced them at the right-hand side of your screen is in poetry form. So if you write things like that and you do it, let's say over and over again, they may come to understand that, yeah, I can change somebody's work to poetry, not the entire work, but I can pick a paragraph and write my poem. And as they practice, then they will be getting the full understanding and even end up becoming a great poet. Okay, then can we look at another example? All right, I picked this example from Christopher Look form. Christopher Look. The understanding is that Christopher Look didn't actually like the poetry aspect of a literature. He had love for prose, he had love for drama, but since he didn't like literature, so he said that at a point in time, like he said last night, I was at the London airport when I saw a rubbish container with this inscription, and the inscription read, "Unwanted literature should be placed here." So I decided to express my hatred for poetry, one of the branches of literature, and discard it in the dustbin. So he saw this. He just saw this inscription, and I said, "Unwanted literature should be placed here." So because he had that negative attitude towards poetry, because he didn't want poetry at all, he said, okay, if I have the opportunity to discard unwanted literature, why don't I discard poetry? But to discard poetry, he went home, sat down, and changed that writing from the prose form to poetry form. And that one is at the right-hand side. And it read, "Last night in London airport, I saw a wooden bin labeled unwanted literature is to be placed herein. So I wrote a poem and dropped it in." So when we try helping them with this, they will definitely overcome that negative attitude towards poetry. Maybe the unwanted literature was not actually talking about poetry. In fact, I'm sure it was not talking about poetry. Maybe they had meant unwanted peppers or just litter, rubbish should be discarded. But once the person didn't just want poetry, he decided to write poetry and discard it in the dustbin. So I try using this one. I wrote it and I changed it to poetry for our students to see. Even the man who didn't like poetry ended up writing a poem. So when we do that, we may get results. Okay, can we move to the next slide? Then the third way of helping students, to overcome their negative or their negative attitude towards poetry is that as teachers, we should establish a poetry book box for our students, as suggested by Clark et al. Clark et al. Conducted a research in 2004 and came out with this suggestion that for teachers to be able to stimulate and arouse the interest of students in poetry, they should establish what we call poetry book box. And he defined poetry book box as a collection of poems written by students. So to make this box challenge effective, he outlined some steps that teachers should follow. After you successfully establish the poetry book box and announce to students that the box is all about a challenge in writing poem, that is why I call it poetry writing challenge, then you should be able to follow some steps to make the box a successful one. One, you should organize poetry clubs. And what do you know in poetry? And show interest and commitment to the activities of the club. We have been hearing what do you know, mostly in other subjects, but it seems poetry is neglected, like I said earlier. We can equally organize what do you know in poetry, that kind of challenge among students. And when you just organize it anyhow, if you really organize it, it may not give you results. Maybe you organize, attach some kind of prizes and other things to it. Then students are going to give their effort. They are going to actively participate because they may want to receive some of the prizes. Then mostly as teachers, we can always look for some recordings, tape recordings of poems, either from some brilliant students somewhere or even from our colleague teachers, or you yourself can do that. Then you let students listen to those recordings from time to time. Then as they listen, maybe you can declare a challenge in a day or in a week. The challenge can last for a week for all students to write their poems, what they know, especially about poems, and you grade them accordingly. If they submit their poem, then you compile the poems that are written by students. Then you rank the poem, in order, indicating the name of the students. Hello, hello, President.
Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you. Please go on. Go ahead,
Okay,
please.
okay, thank you. Then you compile the poems that are written by students, rank them in order, and indicate the names of the students who wrote them. Then, if possible, you can try to market them, display their poems, either on the school notice board, either in the school library, or if they have a local magazine, then you publish it there. At least it is going to motivate them. Some of them will even go home and consult people in their environment to help them write nice poems. Our attention is to just develop their love for poetry. Then you play some of the recorded poems that are written by students in the library, like I said earlier, and publish it in the local newspapers. At least they will know that poetry is important, and most of them will give their best because they may want their names to go into the school history books. Okay, can we look at another way of overcoming their challenge? Another way of overcoming their challenge is what was suggested by Shaside in 2002. Shaside, a Ghanaian researcher, he was of the view that there are three principles which can attract students' interest and make them love poetry. So he named the principles as choice, then attitude, and he spoke about teaching and learning materials. Now the choice is just talking about we teachers choosing points that are within the language ability of the learners. At least for the start, don't go and pick a poem that would, the vocabulary, the diction of that poem would discourage them from reading. First of all, you should be careful with the kind of poem you're going to choose or to prescribe for them to read. So we should always take care of the language and choose appropriate poems that will suit their competence level. Then the attitude. We teachers, if we are exhibiting negative attitude towards poetry in the classroom, then it is going to run through among students because we are actually role models. So if a student sees you not giving your best, you teach all other aspects of literature, you teach the drama, you teach the prose. Then when it gets to poetry, you teach it once in a while. They may suspect that no, poetry is not all that important. And that might be the reason why our master is not teaching it frequently like the other genres of literature. Then we also have to try to use teaching learning materials. We believe that poetry or language per se, it is always difficult to look for teaching learning materials, but we can be resourceful, we can innovate. The teaching learning materials are there if only we are ready to if only we are ready to get them and help our students learn. we can dramatize. We can call it a teaching learning material. If you don't have any concrete thing to send it to class, if you will not get the author himself for the students to hear his or her voice, and you can try dramatizing. And it is a teaching learning material. It will help them to develop love for poetry. Can we move to the next? Okay, then the next thing is we teachers should consider, our method of teaching. Let's consider our method of teaching. Let us avoid the one-man show method of teaching. That is the teacher-centered method. You consider students as containers where you have to only come and deposit knowledge. You go into class to teach poetry and the conversation is one-sided. You only go and tell them what you have prepared. It may not help, but let us always seek for their opinions. Let us give them the opportunity to tell us their own view with regards to the poem under discussion, and it will help. So let's discuss the teacher-centered method of teaching, where we impose our opinions about a particular poem on students. We shouldn't force students to memorize, but let's look for some pragmatic steps, like we mentioned earlier, to help them have that love. Then we should take note as teachers that poetry is not just learned through memorization. We should not always think of forcing students to memorize poetry. When we try to force them to memorize, it is going to frustrate them and weaken their spirit in learning poetry. Okay, can we move to the next slide, please? Okay, then let's look at the teaching aids. Teaching aids are things which are intended to help the teacher to teach more effectively, or which enable the learner to learn more readily. So the teaching aids could be primary, it could be secondary, it could be tertiary. But for we, the language teachers, especially poems, if we are at a disadvantaged location and we may not get the direct author, we may not get the audio, then we can just go by the tertiary. We try to dramatize, we try to demonstrate, or we pick the poems either in stanzas. Just don't try to teach a full poem. You can pick one stanza and teach the poem. Then you continue. It is not compulsory to just get to class and teach the whole poem and walk away. The only thing we should do is do something that will actually motivate the learners to move along with you. Then we teachers, like I said earlier, we have the impression that poetry requires no use of teaching resources. And therefore we always end up teaching in the abstract. And that may be the reason why students are having this kind of attitude towards poetry. We equally did that. Even up to now, maybe some of us, I am one, I don't have much love for poetry. Maybe because of the way I was taken through. Okay, can we move to the next slide? Now, as teachers, we already know the importance of teaching and learning materials. If you're using teaching aids in your lesson presentation, what are the benefits? So let us just go over them. After all, we know teaching aids make lessons more practical and real. Then it arouses learners' interest in the lesson. Then once it arouses their interest, then they try to learn independently. Then it leads to an improvement in the communicative ability of pupils. Maybe if they're dramatizing, if it is an audio and you want them to listen and tell you what they have heard, so once they try doing that, it is going to improve their communicative competence. Then it promotes self-learning. I said it, independent learning. Then it enables learners to remember about half of what they hear and see in class, half of what they hear and see. So we cannot bring A's that will help them to see, but we can bring things that they will hear, maybe things that they will hear and bring their own input, their own judgment. It may help facilitate the teaching and learning process and equally help them to develop that positive attitude towards poetry. Okay, then can we move ahead? All right, now let's come to Appreciating poetry. What goes into poetry appreciation? After you have taken them through the elements, after you have taught them, you may now want them to appreciate a full poem. So still, don't say you have taught them the elements. Once you are about to start teaching them poetry appreciation, let them understand that before you appreciate a poem, there are some key elements that you need to look for in that poem. And if you're able to identify those elements, it may be easy. It may be easier for you to appreciate the poem. So one is the subject matter. I explained earlier, the theme of the poem. I think I said that. Then the language used, we discuss it, structure of the poem, the mood, the atmosphere, the mood, the poetry will evoke emotions and feelings in readers' mind, evokes emotions and feelings in readers and audiences. That is, I think, the mood, the atmosphere. How do you feel after going through the poem? Okay, then let's move ahead. Now, after telling them, after reviewing their mental frame of experience, walking them through the elements again, you now introduce them to at least a new term. Just let them know that you cannot read a poem once and get full meaning on that poem. At least reading a poem and giving a better appreciation should demand you reading that poem over and over again. We should read the poem over and over again. So these steps were suggested. We should paraphrase. We should guide them to paraphrase a poem. Now, the paraphrasing will help us to know the storyline, the storyline, or you get the storyline of the poem clearly. Then it will give you the surface meaning of the poem. To paraphrase something, you are not just going to follow the words, but try to paraphrase the poem in your own words to see whether you can get surface meaning before you later come and look for the deeper meaning. Then you consider denotative and connotative meaning of words. Poets are very, very manipulative when it comes to their choice of words. They play with the words, they play with language. So in a poem, they always give you the denotative and the connotative meaning of words. The denotative meaning is just talking about the dictionary meaning of the word. Then the connotative meaning of words refers to meanings that have been conferred, meanings that have been conferred on them. If for example, okay, if I have a word like home, the word home by denotation, it will mean a place where one lives. Home is just about a place where one lives. But if I want to look at the connotative meaning of the word home, home may suggest security. Home may suggest comfort. Home may suggest togetherness, family, feel free. So if you get a word in a poetry, try and find out whether you may be able to fish out the denotative and the connotative meaning, maybe by regular practice and reading the poem over and over. Once you read the poem, you're going to become familiar with the sound. And once you get familiar with the sound, at least you are going to, let me say, get the insight of what the poet is talking about. Then you can be able to appreciate it. So these are the techniques that we should guide our students in appreciating poetry. Then you ask questions. If you are reading poem, you ask questions that will generate answers to help you understand the poem better. How is the poem structured? By then you have told them the structure of a poem, how many stanzas, and the poem is written in how many stanzas. The poem is written in how many lines, all those things. You ask them, what can you say about his diction? Is the poet straightforward with the language? Is the poet using archaic words and all those things? If they get this technique, it will help them to appreciate poetry. Okay, can we move ahead? All right, I just use this poem, the Ozymandias by Percy Shelley. The poem is written this way, and you can try paraphrasing it. I met a traveler from an antique land who said, two vast and tranquil legs of a stone stand in the desert. Near them on the sand, have sunk a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that he scoffed well those passions, red, which yet survive, stamped on these liveless things, the hand that mocked them, and the heart that fed, and on the pedestal, these words appear. My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty and desperate. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. We as teachers can try to guide our students by paraphrasing this point first. Maybe you can paraphrase it over and over. If you paraphrase one, then you re-paraphrase. Then you re-paraphrase. You may get the simple diction of the poem that will help facilitate the understanding of your students. So when I try paraphrasing these ones, we have the narrator recount his encounter with a traveler from an ancient land. He quotes the traveler. The narrator is just telling us what the traveler told him, and that is what forms the poem. So the traveler told him that he has seen two huge legs of a ruined statue. The legs were the only part of the statue that remained standing. It describes the face of the statue, which has sunk in the sand close by the standing legs, as one with a frown, a sneer, and wrinkled lips. It is obvious from the attention paid to these details that the sculptor did a good job. Written at the base of the statue were these words: my name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty and despair. So the traveler then states that nothing of such a mighty civilization and king is left as far as the eyes can see. One can only see sun. Maybe we can still try and paraphrase this in another way, up to the level that will help our students to understand now. As for poetry, whether we like it or not, writers will always try to hide their meaning, especially with regards to their, the choice of words. Okay, please, can we move? Can we move first? Okay. Now, the poison tree, we try to paraphrase it. I read it earlier. Let's just go to the possible appreciation. In the poem, the personal feels angry with his friend. He confesses his anger, and quickly they resolve their differences or disagreement. However, when he's angry with his enemy, he conceals the anger and secretly nurses it till it grows into a tree and bears fruits. This means that anger that is kept as a secret can lead to a deadly consequence. I think that is the basic explanation of William Blake's poem. So if you read this poem like I was angry with my friend, I told my rat did end. If you finish reading the poem, try to paraphrase it. And let me also say that unto me, especially with those in the senior high school, and even at the basic level, when you are going to take the poems, pick the poems that has simple diction. Teach the student with points with simple diction first before you get to those points that you yourself think and the language is a little bit complex. Because that one will help them. So this William Blake's poem, I think if you're going to start teaching a beginner, it is okay, the language is simple. I was angry with my friend. Then you say in the poem, the persona feels angry with his friend. Or you can say he was not happy with the friend. So he told the friend that I'm not happy with you. Then once we confess our anger, possibly the friend might have apologized. Oh, I'm sorry, whatever I have offended you, that leads to this anger, just forgive me. Then they resolve the anger. But the same voice, the same persona was angry with another friend and decided to keep it as a secret. Then the anger grew till it becomes a tree. The tree bears fruits, and the end result of that fruit was to kill the one he was angry with. If we try explaining this, changing our explanation, it may help them. And that would be a better way of helping students to appreciate poetry. Because those reading elective literature, I think they are answering essay questions. And all those things are about appreciating points. Okay, can we move, please? Okay, I think after William Blake's three, I had wanted for us to look at types of poetry, but our time will not permit us, and this is how far we will go with the presentation. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to lead the presentation. I'm grateful. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. In fact, that was an awesome presentation, a very wonderful presentation. And we are so grateful that you honored the invitation to lead this presentation. Thank you so much. I want to call on Miss Fati to take over, and then we'll have our open forum where participants will be able to ask their questions, and then we will discuss them. So Miss Fati, over to you.
Hello, participants. We thank our speaker so much for a wonderful session that he has taken us through. We've really enjoyed it. A lot of things that he has shared with us, especially regarding the guidelines and some of the ways that we can help our learners to love poetry. We would like to open the forum now. If you have any question, you can put it to our speaker. Thank you.
You may want to type in your question by using the chat box, or if you want to speak, you can indicate that, and then we'll unmute you for you to ask your question. Thank you.
It can also be in the form of an addition or a suggestion. Anything at all you would like to add to what our speaker has said, you can add it for us, please.
All right, so there's a question coming from Prosper Dobe. He says, what is his view on the use of projectors to project poems for analysis?
Please come again.
What is your view on the use of projectors to project poems for analysis?
My view on the use of projectors.
Yes,
to project poems for analysis.
Yes, that's it.
Oh, yeah, on to me, I would say it is nice. But before you will use the point analysis, take away the attention of our learners, and they may not be able to follow the analysis. It is good, but finish teaching them again and now project it. By then, they are already familiar and they will see all the discussions that you have projected. I think this is how far I'll go with the question.
Okay, we have another one coming from, oh dear participant, kindly rename your account so that we'll know your name. I don't know the name to mention yet, but the participant is saying a lot has been said about making students love poetry. What happens when the teacher himself doesn't love poetry?
Wow, that is a great question. Very, very technical. What happens when you, the teacher yourself, don't like poetry?
Oh, yes.
I think that was why I cited Saturday 2002 when he spoke about the 3 approaches that will help our students love poetry. At least you, the teacher, a responsibility has been given to you. The future of our learners have been entrusted in your hands. So whether you initially had the love for poetry or not, by virtue of the fact that you have the opportunity to teach them, you have to do everything possible and have love for poetry. If you don't have it, get closer to somebody you think the person has love for poetry. And we can do peer teaching. There is no crime in confessing your weakness to your colleague to help you. So if you, the teacher, don't have love for poetry, try and overcome it. In fact, it will be a great challenge. Because what will you teach your students? Try and overcome it by getting closer to people you think they have love for poetry or they have little idea about poetry. Then they'll help you overcome that challenge. If not, I don't know how the questions should be answered. Or better still, the educational authorities and maybe IELTA International should take up the mantle. We are many, those teachers that don't have love for poetry. Then we should organize a webinars for those teachers, and I'm sure they will overcome it. Okay.
All right, we have, I saw 2 hands up. I saw, oh, they've lowered their hands. Okay, there's still a hand up. All right, kindly unmute yourself and then put your question across. I can't get the name because the name hasn't been changed.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, please. Your name, please.
Yes.
My name is Daniel Nanajima.
Okay.
Yes, I teach in the senior high. Now, before they get there are books selected for them. But here's the case, I heard from him that we should choose poems for them. Instead of choosing, we should allow them to rather create their own poems. So what about that? What should we do? Should we go ahead, allow them, or continue with the selected books that have been given to us to teach them?
Okay. Thank you very much, sir, for your question. I think the focus of the presentation is on making students love poetry. I totally agree with you. There are some prescribed books and poems that our students are supposed to learn at the senior high school. They have prescribed it for us, and there is nothing we can do. But what I was saying is that you already know that students don't have much interest in poetry. And you have also realized that the prescribed poems have a complex vocabulary. I think it will be better for us to, within our own local arrangement, pick a poem that has an ordinary language, a poem that is friendly, maybe to you. If you are a teacher, if you meet a friendly poem, you will know. Then you teach our students using that poem. Then you prepare their mind, they develop the love for it before you now go into the prescribed ones. That was what I was saying. But if you go straight, for example, I think now we are teaching the ninth fall in Soweto. Thank you, sir. Is it not true? Then we are teaching an African thunderstorm. Look at the African thunderstorm. Look at the ninth fall in Soweto. If you pick that point and you want to teach a student who do not even have the interest in learning poetry, you are rather going to add salt to his or her wound. Because the ninth fall in Soweto is not friendly. But prepare them with some simple poems. Let them have the interest before you go into the difficult one. Just to fulfill the educational slogan that says that teaching or learning should be based from known to unknown. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, there is a question coming from Yahaya Mahama. The participant is asking, please, what is the simplest way one can explain the meaning of poetry to his or her learners? A practical definition will help.
That, what, please, the question again.
What is the simplest way one can explain the meaning of poetry to his or her learners? He is asking for a practical definition.
Okay, me mostly, I always say poetry refers to a creativity of a person's imagination. Anytime I want to explain poetry to my students, I tell them poetry refers to a creativity of a person's imagination. I think apart from this, any other definition at all I would try to give them, it may enter into those in academia. So maybe if he knows and can share with us. But for me, poetry refers to creativity of a person's imagination. I think that is a simple definition I always give to my learners before we go into details.
Mr. Albert, you raised your hand. You can go ahead with your question.
Please, I just want question asked.
Hello, Mr. Albert. I think there is noise coming from your end. Could you type your question so that we read it out for you? There is noise in the background. Kindly type your question in the chat box and we'll read it out for you. Thank you. Okay, before that, someone is asking, can you explain to me more of the diction and imagery? So he is asking for a definition or explanation about diction and imagery.
The diction and imagery.
Yes.
Okay. With the diction, I said the diction refers to the writer's choice of word, the poet. Whatever word the poet decides to write becomes the diction. His choice of vocabulary is the diction. But with the imagery, I said it refers to a situation where writers try to carry our senses along. A situation where they create mental pictures in the minds of we readers and audience. So that is the imagery. When it is affecting your senses by creating mental pictures. And I think I could remember I added that the imagery could be visual. It can be heard, it can be seen. But the diction is just the writer's choice of vocabulary.
All right, we have someone raising their hand, Solomon. Solomon, okay.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just want to add something to the explanation for diction and imagery. When we say diction, we are actually referring to the writer's choice or choices of words. What happens is that, like our presenter rightly mentioned, poetry happens to be complex and a bit abstract. But when you decide, you set out to write a poem, you have a message. So you must set out to get the right words to convey your message. So any word that a poet uses in his or her poem is what we are calling the diction. And those words help to develop the theme, which is the message or the centermost idea from the poet. Now talk about imagery. Also, because of the abstract nature of poetry, sometimes poets want to appeal to your various senses. There are some situations that the poet wants to appeal to your sense of hearing. Now, the poet will use diction. Those are the choices of words to describe an event or situation.
Hello, Solomon, you've muted yourself. Kindly unmute yourself and continue.
Yeah, hello.
Yes, okay.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, so I think we don't have any further question in the chat box. We have contributions. One coming from Mr. Yalkan. He says, in the first place, congratulations to Sir Jacob for such a powerful presentation. I want to add that when we allow the learners to relate the poem to their immediate environment, it helps to render the poem practical. This takes into consideration the fact that we have cultural background. Thank you. And then we have this coming from Madam Ruth Athenka. She says, I would prefer using the projector to highlight the elements after taking students through the poem first. Okay, and then we have this also coming from Prosper Dogbe. He says, to also develop students' interest, I sometimes allow them to write their own poems on given subject matter, and I tell you, they have great things to say and write, and that improves their interest. All right, thank you so much. Thank you so much. We have this coming from Mr. Kojo Albert. He says, you can make the teaching of poetry simple and meaningful by using the dictionary. Thank you so much for your wonderful contributions. Miss Patty, you may continue with that.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us today for our second international webinar. We are so grateful for having you on board, especially our international president, Dr. Neil, and then Ma'am Afseen. We would like to call on Dr. Neil if he has anything to share with us as we are in our closing moment. Dr. Neil. Do we still have Dr. Neil?
Yes, he's with us.
Okay.
Hello, Dr. Neil.
Okay, then I think we can have Ma'am Afseen. Dr. Afseen, are you with us, please? We would like to hear your closing thoughts on our session today.
I think Dr. Afshin is not yet here. I'm sure she has an internet connection challenge or something.
Oh, okay. Okay. No problem. So once again, we would like to express our gratitude to all of you for joining us all over the world. We also like to thank our president and our host today, and to Mr. Jacob for leading us and teaching us these tricks to use in our classrooms. We are so grateful to you for this lesson that we've all learned today. We will also like to announce that we'll be having our next international webinar in March. And we'll also be putting the details of our social media handles in the chat boxes so that you can go ahead. If you are not yet a member of IELTA Ghana, you can just click any of those social media handles and then join us. Do we have Dr. Neil with us?
Hello. Okay. Yes, he's here. All right. Before Dr. Neil comes, a quick one. I've posted a link for the attendance and evaluation sheet. Kindly fill in the form in order to get your certificate of participation. Remember, certificates are generated by using the names we get from the form. So kindly fill it in and then we'll get back to you. Thank you. Dr. Neil, you're welcome.
Hello, everyone. Hello, every member and teacher. I'm so happy to be part of this. IELTA Ghana. Thanks, Vanessa, for organizing this wonderful event. And thank you so much for speaker, Mr. Jacob. It was nice to listen how students love poetry. I am a poetry lover as well. I have found it cool making our students loving to write this topic.
Hello, Dr. Neil. Oh, sorry, but I think your, I don't know whether it's the audio or the internet connection. Okay, we have,
Hi, Ebenezer, can you hear me?
oh
Can you hear
yes,
me?
yes, it's better, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ebenezer. Thank you, all the members of IELTA Ghana and all IELTA members from around the world. I am so happy to be part of this wonderful event organized by IELTA Ghana. And thanks so much to the speaker, Mr. Gundo Jacobo Moisop. So thank you for sharing your experience about poetry with us. I am a poetry lover, and me as a teacher, I have some difficulties in making my students love writing. It is not easy to teach our students how to write. So thank you for everything you shared today. I am so happy, and I am sure all the audience is also happy. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ayel Tagana.
Thank you, Dr. Daniel. All right, we also have, we have Sir Bryant with us. Sir Bryant is the Learners Development Coordinator for IELTA International. Sir Bryant, can you give us your closing words? Oh, you can unmute.
Oh, I think it's working. Hi, Ambassador, can you hear me?
Oh yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. First and foremost, this was a great webinar. Actually, just like what our president has mentioned, I also enjoy poetry making, and having this such webinar can help us educators in order for us to give to our learners the right way on how they can enjoy the topic of poetry. So this is very timely. Congratulations to our dear speaker and to the whole IELTA Ghana community. Job well done once again. Congratulations to you, and to you, Ambassador. As always, keep up the good work.
Thank you, Sir Brian. Thank you. We also have Teacher Nemala from Malaysia. She's the ambassador of IELTA in Malaysia. We want to take her closing words.
Hi, Mr. Ebenezer. Thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to learn about poetry making because I'm teaching in an elementary school. So we have poetry in our textbook, but we don't pay that much of attention. So much so that I lost the essence of teaching poetry. But then after joining this session, I must congratulate and say, well done, good job to Mr. Jacob, because that one, he has given a lot of information to engage the learners. The one part that I think applicable that is very, very fantastic, I would say, is that the use of the narrative part of writing and convert that into a poem. So I'm going to try out that method with my little ones. So other than that, everything was perfect. Thank you so much for this golden opportunity. Well done, Mr. Jacob.
Thank you, Ms. Nemala. Okay. All right, as I said earlier on, kindly fill in the attendance and evaluation sheet for your certificates. All right, kindly fill in the attendance sheet. I've posted a link. Please fill it in, and then we'll get back to you with your certificate and probably the slides to this presentation. I want to post it once again. And then the form will be open till, let me say, for about 3 to 6 hours after the session, after which it will be closed. And please, 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 kindly fill in the form We don't want to have the situation where you will come into us that you attended a session, you didn't get a certificate, you couldn't fill in the form. Kindly fill it in while there is time so that we can process everything. And then by next week, you will get your certificate. Thank you. All right, so let me go ahead with the next thing we have here. We have awarding of certificates. And our certificate for the second international webinar conducted and hosted by the Academic Department, International English Language Teachers Association, Ghana chapter on February 19th, 2022. All right, so the first certificate is our certificate of recognition, which is proudly presented to Jacob Moisop-Gandil for serving as the resource speaker during the second international webinar for English language teachers, conducted and hosted by the Academic Department of International English Language Teachers Association, Ghana chapter, on the topic, Making Students Love Poetry, given this 19th day of February 2022 via Zoom, and is duly signed by Dr. Neil Arvalo Alcantara, the president of IELTA International. It's also signed by Ms. Fati Isipu, who is the academic director, IELTA Ghana, and yours truly, Ebenezer, the IELTA ambassador in Ghana. All right, thank you so much, Mr. Jacob. Thank you so much for your wonderful and awesome presentation given to us on poetry. The next certificate goes to our participants. And as I said earlier on, you are going to get certificate of participation for your active participation during the second international webinar for English language teachers, conducted and hosted by the Academic Department of International English Language Teachers Association, Ghana chapter, on the topic, Making Students Love Poetry, given this 19th day of February 2022 via Zoom. And your certificate is also going to be signed by Dr. Neil, the IELTA president, Ms. Fati Isifu, the academic director of IELTA Ghana, and then myself. Yes, someone is asking, can you please send the form for attendance? It has been posted in the chat box. Kindly check it. I'm reposting it. Please fill in the form before the meeting comes to an end. All right. A few announcements here and there. Okay, for those of us who are in Ghana, I would like to inform you that you can still, if you've not submitted your membership details, kindly do so. You can fill in the membership form, which have been posted on the various platforms. And also, I want to inform you that we are working on so many things as far as IELTA Ghana is concerned. We are working on our official registration with the Registrar General's Department. We are working on partnership with the National Teaching Council and other bodies. We are going to talk about that in our subsequent meetings. So these are some of the things you should be looking out for. And then next week on 27th, we are going to have another webinar by our mother association, IELTA International, which will be streamed on Facebook, and it will also be on a Zoom platform. So kindly take note of that and then do well to attend. Thank you. All right, I want to hand over to Ms. Patty.
Thank you so much once again, our president, for leading us and then taking us through. Once again, we would like to thank the Academic Department of Ghana. We would like to thank Dr. Neil. Then we would also like to thank Ma'am Afshin for joining us. We will also thank our speaker for today, Mr. Jacob Gundel, for a great job that he has done. For all participants who joined us, we thank you for being with us. We are hoping that next week you join us on our international webinar from our mother organization, and then next month in March, our next webinar. Thank you so much for being with us today. We are grateful. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, we are bringing the session Oh, okay. Yeah, so you're asking what does the organization in the form demands? Wherever you work, if you are working with GES, if you are any organization in which you are, kindly put it in there. Thank you. May I know if you have any question about the form? Okay. Please do not leave the Zoom room unless you have filled in the form, because we will not share the form outside of this platform. We are not going to share the form outside of Zoom. So if you haven't filled in the form, please do so before you leave. Yes, if you have any question, kindly type it in the chat box. We are just rounding up, and then we'll bring the session to an end. We are not going to share the form outside of this platform. Yes. So kindly fill the form before you leave. All right. Thank you so much. So that brings us to the end of this session. And as the academic director rightly said, next week, Sunday, we're having one other webinar with our mother organization. Do well to attend. And then we'll be giving you information on our upcoming webinars from time to time on our various platforms. Thank you. So if you are filled in the form, yes, you may leave the room, but don't do so until you have filled in the form.
Yes. Okay, my boss is here.
Please fill in the form. If you have any other question that is not in a way related to this webinar, you may do well by asking on our platforms, on our WhatsApp platforms, or kindly reach out to your district coordinator, regional coordinator, or any of the officials. Thank you.